This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 59, covering Daredevil Season 2, episode 5, Kinbaku. Welcome back, Defenders, to Defenders TV Podcast, episode 59. We're covering Daredevil Season 2, episode 5, Kinbaku. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
I'm one of your other bound and gagged hosts, John.
And I'm free as a daisy. I don't know about those two, but I'm fine, and I'm Chris.
Welcome back, everybody. We've got all three of our hosts on the podcast. This is the first time since Daredevil started, I believe, that we have all three of us at the same time on the podcast.
Well, we had a transatlantic or trans-Siberian host last time, so yeah, but this time is all three of us in a room.
Absolutely, and that brings me on to my first correction of the podcast. John was in Serbia, which made some of our comments a little bit confusing on the last podcast, but yeah, it wasn't freezing at all, were you?
No, it was a nice 22 degrees in Mediterranean style weather.
It's a very different.
Enjoying some nice Greek food and some nice wine in the evenings after work.
Very nice. Some nachos?
No, feta.
Elektra Natchios?
No, Elektra feta.
Ah, okay.
Followed by a lovely Serbian white wine.
Very nice.
Very tasty.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, welcome back, listeners. Really good to have you back with us for our 5th episode of our Daredevil podcast. We just finished up our Agent Carter podcast for season 2 just this week. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, go download it over at defenderstvpodcast.com. You can look for the iTunes link by going to defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes, or you can pick us up on any other good podcast catcher by looking for Defenders TV Podcast. If you subscribe on there, you'll get our episodes of Daredevil, all of our episodes about Agent Carter, and all of our episodes about Jessica Jones, and upcoming the Marvel movies that are coming up this year. So we'll have Civil War coming up. We've had Fan Four Stick, I think as it's known. We've had a number of other films covered on that feed, but go subscribe. And if you like the show, make sure you do leave us a review in iTunes, which will help other people pick up the podcast. On that note, we have had a couple of requests now that we're finished our Agent Carter coverage, as we covered all of season 1 and season 2 now. And there is a possibility we won't see a season 3. We've had a couple of questions about whether we will be increasing our output for Daredevil. Just wanted to address it here just so everybody is aware of what way we're covering it. We want to make sure that we have as many of the hosts available when we do our podcasts, which can't always be done as quickly as we'd like it to be. What we're going to do is make sure that we have at least one podcast on Daredevil out every week, and hopefully with all three of our hosts available for those podcasts, and hopefully particularly for the big events like Civil War, and for the first episodes of new shows like Luke Cage, all the way up to Doctor Strange. We'll have at least 3 of our hosts here.
Absolutely. In fact, there may be 4. My astral plane self may also be here for the October podcast of Doctor Strange.
You'll certainly probably be on a cloud.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, there were some rather good photographs of Doctor Strange, and in particular, there was Doctor Strange buying Doctor Strange, which was quite nice, in a comic book store in New York, which, for all those lucky people who were there, that must have been awesome.
Yeah, very cool, actually. Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch in his full Doctor Strange costume, standing in a store, comic book shop particularly. Really, really cool for everybody involved there. He
was caped, he was capeless, he was with Mordo, Baron Mordo, he wasn't with Baron Mordo, so all looking fab. And Scott Derrickson, who's directing as well, tweeted that it's a wrap, so all I suppose principal photography it has been done now on Doctor Strange the movie, so it's really into the editing suite, I suppose. Maybe any other additional pickups that they need to do, and of course, hopefully, a few post-credit sequences of Doctor Strange being introduced to the wider world after Civil War.
Absolutely. And Scott Derrickson, I feel your pain. I know how long editing takes, but I'm sure it's even worse for a multi-billion-dollar production like the Marvel Universe. Chris, what did you think of the photographs?
I'm sorry, John. I'm on the fence. I don't know why this is. I think it's the first time we're going to see Doctor Strange he's in full Doctor Strange garb, so the cloak and the blue doublet, which is the first time in the MCU that we're going to see someone not in normal, what we would consider civilian t-shirt, jeans kind of wear. And I think that that's going to take some...
Apart from Cap.
Yeah, Captain America.
Well, hold on. He was back, even back in the 1940s in the first Avenger film. It was still 1940s wear. Whereas this is kind of like, he's wearing his spectral costume.
Yeah, but Vision. What about Vision?
Vision was nude. He was full on, like, just like...
Iron Man?
He wears his gear. No, I mean,
Ant-Man?
I just mean, like, unless we see, Doctor Strange, like Stephen Strange in his, like, day-to-day in the suit type thing, then it's gonna kind of take people a bit of getting used to, because they're filming it in, like, 616. So, like, sorry, 616, is kind of like the standard kind of universe, or sorry, the MCU version, if you want, whatever the numbering is on that one, I don't know. But, like, so you're gonna have people, like, we seen in that set photo that was released, they were cars behind them, but these guys are dressed in, like, almost like Asgardian kind of tunics and doublets, so it's just gonna be a bit of, kind of, we can't explain away, so they're gonna have to say, like, oh, well, this, when he goes all magic, he's gonna, like, suddenly just kind of the cloak billows out and all that kind
I mean, there's a couple of things that definitely, like, this could have heavy CGI following production, with them in that scene. I think it's devoid of the cinematography, so, like, I mean, to be honest, the colours do look a bit kind of, not washed is not the right word, but they don't look as rich as probably they might do, or as darkened, or whatever style they're going for, as they would do, because obviously there's the cinematography isn't necessarily there. I mean, I would agree that hopefully we will see him as Dr. Stephen Strange, the surgeon, and that we see some element of that normality. It could also be maybe he's on the astral plane, where he would just generally be in blue, and he does take on that blue appearance. And the only other thing I would say is that on that, the cloak looked weird. It looked too small. But I think maybe there's going to be CGI cloak added. Yeah, definitely.
Like Superman.
I mean, yeah, there must be. And so that's probably just for him to help him act in terms of maybe holding it if he needs to, or swishing it, or whatever it is he needs
Swish.
to do.
Covering his face.
Swish.
I mean, he's in Nepal. We've seen those pictures of him in Nepal where he's in regular clothes.
Yes.
So, I mean, we will see that.
Absolutely. But cool to get some set photos officially released. No production stills yet, I think, because that's the big difference that we're talking about here. No particular production stills, so nothing after the fact, because they're only going into editing, only just finished shooting. So they have released some photographs, as you say, from the Nepal shoot, which was in October last year, I think. And these photos are from New York last week. Loads of photographs taken through really crappy phone cameras that have been released over time, but these are the first really high quality pictures of him in what looks very like the costume version of Doctor Strange, showing that they're not shying away from at least trying to do the real comic book costume version of Doctor Strange, which is nice. So I do take your point, Chris, that in a lot of the Marvel movies, we've seen movie versions of the outfits, I suppose, a lot more than probably some of the other older films or older versions of the comic book movies. It really is a good testament to the production that they're really trying to show Doctor Strange as Doctor Strange, not trying to have him in street clothes doing magic, showing that he is going to be wearing the traditional costume.
Well, I think definitely either they would have gone for totally new look, I mean, with elements or themes from that traditional costume, or they've kind of got to go with the costume. But don't forget, we're going to have Black Panther. I mean, there's a guy in a black leotard, essentially.
yeah, true.
And
he looks cool, though, in Civil War.
He does, exactly. But that is final trailer quality visuals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep, totally agree. That's the Doctor Strange coverage for this week. We will be covering more Doctor Strange as we lead up to October 28th, I'm sure, because we will talk about it every week.
I'm sure when the trailer hits, there will be a 15-hour podcast.
A special podcast for that one.
Just for John. Myself and Derek won't even be on the podcast. It will just be John talking for 15 hours.
I might do the intro and then say, John, what do you think?
Welcome to John's monologue. That and for Iron Fist as well.
Oh, all three of us will be here for Iron Fist without a doubt.
Sorry.
No, absolutely, but I will still have my 15-hour monologue.
That's very true. That's very true.
But speaking of Iron Fists, I think onto Kinbaku.
Yep. It is about that time to get into our episode of Daredevil. So this is season 2, episode 5, Kinbaku, directed by Floria Sigismondi. I get all the best names to mess up. Sorry about that. Floria is well known for directing tons of videos for very, very cool music videos in the past. One of her biggest ones was Marilyn Manson's Beautiful People, which,
cool.
Yeah, really, really classic video. You'll definitely remember it if you saw it. And that style has been used many, many times after the fact. She also directed the excellent movie, actually, The Runaways, starring Kristen Stewart and Dakota Fanning. It was kind of the story of Joan Jett and the band The Runaways. So a really good movie there, really good passed to the director of this episode. And the episode was written by Lauren Schmidt Hissrich, who came from a past working on The West Wing. So passed with some cool political intrigue and political drama, at this time turning her hands to the Little Hell's Kitchen brigade. John, do you want to tell us what she gave us in this episode?
Sure. A former lover, Elektra Natchios, arrives in Hell's Kitchen to ask for Matt Murdock's help with her father's business dealings with the company Roxxon Energy Corporation. However, her appearance turns his world upside down as it reignites the painful past of his father's murder and his history with Elektra. Matt refuses to help her, though he spies on her business dealings, and instead looks forward to his blossoming romance with Karen Page. As Karen and Matt head out on their first date, Karen keeps her continued pursuit of the truth about the Punisher and his past from him. However, after the meal, Murdock is drawn back to Elektra's apartment and is reminded by her of his potential for darkness at the home of Roscoe Sweeney, the killer of Jack Murdock. But just as he is about to leave, unexpected guests converge on Natchio's penthouse, and she tells him to prepare to fight.
So lots of flashbacks in this episode. A big return to young Matt and his wonderful haircut and his great square glasses. Loved it. Really good. If you're joining us for the first time for this episode of Daredevil, just to let you know, the way we cover our episodes is we discuss our top 5 points, some good, some bad about the episode, between each of the three of us. And hopefully through covering those 5 points, we'll cover the full episode. And then we tell you whether we defend it or not.
Yeah, those square glasses really reminded me of the artwork from Daredevil Yellow, actually, the Loeb book and series of comic issues that were pulled together. I think you have Hulk Grey and I think there's a few others as well, but like Daredevil Yellow really... Those square glasses really reminded me of that series of comics, which was really cool. I love the way they kind of de-aged him. I presume it was lots of foundation and a wig.
Yeah. Oh, love the glasses. Love the way it really shows you immediately every time you go to Matt Murdock, that it is right in the past. You can tell very quickly that you're back with young Matt Murdock.
Well, he's clean shaven in every one of the flashbacks. It's like he hit 30 and then suddenly went, nope, I forgot to shave every day. That's it. I've done it for my 20s. That was the only way I knew, because there was 1 second it was like, oh, like the swept off hair. Okay, yes, he had. The wig was sometimes shifting, especially in the
love scene.
Well, I'm not calling it that. Fogwell's
Kinbaku.
In the Fogwell's gym scene, because that is not a love scene, and we'll get to that briefly later.
We will, but do you want to kick us off with your first point, Chris?
Okay, well, look, let's not beat around the bush. Let's just jump into Elektra. This is our official introduction to our Daredevil kind of verse. I don't know how to kind of think. So, we obviously did get briefly the mention of, in season 1, where he was Matt's Greek girlfriend was back in the flashback. So, like, we knew it was coming, and I'm glad they waited until now.
Yeah.
Me too.
I enjoyed I really enjoyed the flashback that kind of set it up. Aside from some of the wig falling and I know it wasn't their fault. It was a fight scene when they were in the gym. But anyway, I'm going astray. The narrative of Elektra leading Matt astray and him liking it was really, really, really sold well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And right until the point where you obviously they're in the mansion, and then you actually understand kind of why he didn't want to. Like, Elektra's offering, like, Matt, his father's murderer, to execute, and it drives home how twisted her ethics are, and it's clear that, like, we see the formulation of Matt's kind of moral judgment, like, and how he's kind of, like, that up until that point he was probably on the fence, and then at that point it kind of crystallizes. It was good. I like this as an origin to their relationship. It's a bit different from the comics, because like Elektra she appeared in Daredevil 168, which was 1981, and that was back in the Frank Miller era, and they were somewhat faithful. Like that joyride in the red sports car, that's directly out of The Man Without Fear. You kind of run with Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. And we mentioned it previously, actually last season, because this is where Matt got it. Well, this was when the comics introduced Matt's the Man in Black kind of proto DD suit. But it was good. I liked her introduction. Like, they could have taken this many ways. I think what it comes down to is actually Elodie Yung. She really sells Elektra as this complex, inscrutable, seductive kind of presence. You can
classy psychopath. I had down
exactly. Yes.
Absolutely.
She is like the Black Widow. She's seductive. She draws you in, but then underneath that, she's kind of got her dark side. Definitely.
Certainly. And yeah, I like that touch, and I like the connections with the Frank Miller version of Elektra. I love Elektra Assassin. That book is fantastic to me. I love her introduction in Man Without Fear. I think it's a great relationship the two of them build up, and absolutely the element of her leading Matt astray. And eventually Foggy is the one that calls it out in the comics. He's the one that is telling Matt that she's leading him astray. It's not needed in this. I like that they make it Matt's choice. I like that he's the one that sees how badly she's leading him astray in this version. So, really, really good.
Yeah, you can understand why Matt would fall for her. Or the Matt
Certainly.
back then. So the Matt we were introduced to back in college, and the Matt he is now, and you can see where that path was taking him and why he diverted. And then you actually now understand, like, this is like proto Man in Black. Like, this is the man who obviously can fight. He obviously hadn't been up to that point. And then his moral compass was cemented probably in this flashback.
Yeah.
But overall, look, I think Elektra's origin in the comics has kind of been skewed quite a lot. Like, depending on which arc you're reading, remember, she was a Skrull during the Secret Invasion. But I think I'm so happy they kind of went with Miller and Romita's kind of that origin, the Man Without Fear origin. Like, met her in college, he was impressionable. Like, I did like the cocky Charlie Cox at the bar trying to chat her up, and then she just destroys him. And then you can see again, this is Charlie Cox, why I actually really like him. And I want to see him. I don't want to see him go to something else because we might lose him as Daredevil, but I want to see him in other roles as well, because I think he could handle that quite interesting. He plays emotions on his face quite well, in terms of you can see the confusion, the cogs turning as she kind of is destroying him, and then he flips it back on her.
Absolutely. And a fundamental part of Matt Murdock's character really is that he's able to twist anything to his advantage because of his negotiation skills. It's one of his other little superpowers, I suppose. So, so seeing that way of being, he is a lawyer, remember? So he is able to talk people round to his way of thinking, which I loved in that scene as well. Really, really good. John, do you want to give us your first point?
It's very similar to Chris's, that whole Elektra and Matt, and there's a few things. I love the champagne and whiskey part, where Elektra's the champagne and Matt's the whiskey watch. Macallan 12-year-old malt there. And I like the fact that she does take a sip of whiskey, I think, from a decanter at Roxxon's boardroom. If only all boardroom meetings involved whiskey, it would probably make them go a bit smoother. But I liked how at the start there was this idea, and it goes back to what Chris said about where Matt finally realizes that, she isn't necessarily the person for him, confronted with the possibility of killing his dad's murderer, and taking him out.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that at the start, that high society party, and, she kind of keeps him back and says that he's with me. And then, there's almost that element of a kindred spirit there. It's the fact that both of them have this, love of boxing, of that kind of thing, have got those heightened senses. However, at that moment in time, he doesn't realize quite how deep and dark hers goes until in Roscoe's mansion, and being given that offer to kill him. And I just thought that was a really nice progression all the way through there, this past between the two of them. And I think it really kind of was a great different departure, given that we just had the Punisher sort of initial arc of it with so much violence and so on, that this was kind of a violent love story, also being played out against a new blossoming romance with regards to Karen and Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really, we find out that they both have very different ideas of what fun ultimately is. And Matt, in the present then, with all of this memory going on, is like, you don't know me anymore, not ever again. I mean, really harsh.
Absolutely.
I just thought that was really, really good. And I think you mentioned the bar.
Yep.
The conversation at the bar where, I think, is it Elektra goes, "You're pretty, but you're dumb. You lost before you even got to the plate." She's there, very successful. And then he's kind of like, "You're bored, that daddy's money can't buy you what you want," which is the unexpected. She likes that thrill of the high speed car,
Mm-hmm.
the public, sex, ultimately the breaking and entering, and possibly the killing. So, she's a psychopath.
Yeah,
I really like that. And I love that, as you say, that it's Matt's choice to say, "No, I don't want to do that." And it's the start of his moral code and compass and stuff. It's really cool.
Absolutely. I also like in that interesting that she tells him he also can make that blind thing work for him as well, which I thought was quite good.
Yeah.
I love the interplay between these two. Honestly, the intro that we got to Elektra last week, where she just says "Hello, Natchio" in her really alluring accent, was fantastic just in itself, to set up this character as to why Matt would have been interested in her. He's supposed to be in his 20s, just around college age, and this is a very attractive, very rich, exotic woman that's fallen into his life. She is going to be hugely attracted to him, and I like how they played it. Definitely really cool.
So then, Derek, what's your first point?
For my first point, I'm going to take off the lead on from the last arc. Really, I suppose we talked about the end of the Punisher arc being in the last episode. What we have here is Karen taking up the mantle and taking up the investigation of the Punisher. I really liked it because we've now got the reason behind what happened to Frank Castle and why he is targeting the gangs of New York. I thought this was a really good way to play it. We had the huge monologue all the way through episode 4, where Frank told the reason why he's so angry and the reason why he's, I suppose, the fact that he's lost his family. Whereas now from Karen, what we hear is the reason why he's targeting the gangs, which is that they were having a gang war in a playground right beside where his kids were playing, and his family died in that gang war. I like that it's played out this way, and I like that it's Karen that finds out the story. I think it's a really good way to play it. Again, it's another element of the choice within this show to tell, not show, which is what we talked about last week, that it's a different way of doing things within this episode. You don't have to show every single thing. You can also tell the story and allow the audience to pick up on it, which I think is a really good choice.
I love the fact that she's been kind of in amongst the archives all day.
Mm-hmm.
And she can't really find an obituary because she's looking for the obituary, not for the talk about gang warfare. So I really like that play. And I like the fact that editor, the same one from season 1, and obviously with the fallout from Ben Urich's murder and that, and his kind of guilt at having treated him the way he is. But there's a nice little reminiscence about Ben Urich, which I thought was really nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, completely. I think it was Allison. That was the name of the reporter.
That's right, yeah.
Like, this, I'm assuming, is not the end of the Punishers. Kind of like, they're just going to drag him out in the back. This is the subplot now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. When I meant initial Punisher arc.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing. Like, I think now we're going to get, I think we discussed it in the last podcast, is like, we're going to get 3 kind of arcs and then a final. So we'll get like 4 episodes Punisher, 4 episodes of Elektra, 4 episodes of, or 2 episodes of kind of filler, and then 3 episodes as finale. Like, we're going to end up getting these filler ones in between somewhere, people. Come on.
I love that a lot of our audience have now watched all the episodes of Daredevil, and I love when they hear us say things like that, where we say something like episode 8 and 9 are going to be filler, and they go, no, those are the best ones. That's where something huge happens.
Yeah, well, look, damn. I need to go into the future where I've seen them all, come back and tell myself so I don't get this.
That'll be our post-podcast review. Don't worry, Chris. You'll have the opportunity. Don't worry.
One thing I did like is that so if we take, say, the theme of the first 4 episodes was kind of rage and adrenaline and Punisher, like punishment. If what I'm getting from this is going to be like manipulation, kind of icy, cold, emotionless. So we're going to, plus ninjas. So it's going to be a different, and I think I'm kind of imagining or kind of putting my own thoughts onto this, but was there slightly different lighting in this episode versus the previous? So whereas the first 4 were very dark, kind of like subdued, now, and kind of like with a kind of almost a kind of a black grey haze, this one has started to, there's more kind of obviously red, and it's kind of slightly brighter. We didn't have arcs in the first season. The whole season was tight, pretty much that, around the building and the destruction of kind of the birth of Daredevil, birth of Kingpin. This is, these are like 4-issue runs.
Yeah.
Like with an overarching kind of thread at the top. So it's very comic book styled. And where you're going to get these different types of emotions and themes and kind of pieces. But I think you're right. I think it's good that they didn't just do typically what any other TV show could have done. It's like, okay, we'll put one reference into Punisher so you know he's in the background, but we'll just focus on this. Like, they gave it a substantial chunk.
Absolutely, and it's a substantial chunk given to Karen to make her, again, keep her involved in the storyline. She's the one that brings the investigation that she has. She's the one that brings it to Matt and to Foggy. Foggy's telling her to give up on it. Matt's just telling her to be safe, effectively, but she's still going to go and investigate it, and I think in a better way than she would have in season 1. She was kind of breaking down doors and doing some silly things in season 1 that got a few people killed.
Yeah, she broke into the apartment.
At least in this episode, she's going to talk to the editor at the New York Bulletin to see if there's any information that he can help her with. At least it's something.
I still had in my notes, is this the return of Karen's bad habits? In the sense that I did destructive ? Because she's told by Foggy and Matt to leave it alone. And yet then she pursues it again. But I think there's something that makes sense here now because she's been at a law firm, whereas I think in the past this seemed to be like her own personal thing. This seems to be tied better to the story. I think in season 1, as people who had listened to the podcast would remember, certainly I was one of the people that just found her motives a bit hard to fathom. And we wondered whether it was, going to be Karen Page's destructive side coming out. And of course, we never really saw that. But she destroyed other people's lives by effectively not listening to people. It seemed really odd. And at this moment where she goes to the paper to look through the archives, she is actually, again, going against what Matt and Foggy have told her to do, which is leave this alone. So I found that interesting, but it made more sense in this to me because of her involvement at Nelson and Murdoch's and just she seemed more integral to that setup than she did in season 1. And I think it makes more sense from what's happening. But still, I wondered, is this a destructive side of Karen? Which we know from the comics she has.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. There's a couple of other instances of that in this episode. But I do like how it's drawn out some of the extra detail about Frank Castle again. The idea that possibly he was Black Ops, that his record has been expunged about him actually being in the army. But the only reason that Karen knows about it is because, as you say, she broke into the house, saw the actual medal, saw him getting the photograph where he's given it by a high ranking person. I think does she say the president or is it, that he's standing with political leader, getting the medal. So, by her knowing all of this information and tying it together, we have a little bit of the investigative side of the storyline coming out. So I did like it, I must say, and finding it out through Karen is definitely a good choice for the episode.
I'm now more curious, is because all of season 1 we were like, where are they taking Karen's story? Are they going to make it her own character, like an MCU version, or are they going down the comic book route that we love? And now my question is, we're going to get this love triangle between Maren and Elektra. And I'm bringing Maren back. This is becoming a thing. Hashtag Maren, hashtag Maren. And I think, could that be the beginning of this destructive piece? In that, okay, so they're not going to let her find out Daredevil's identity probably till the end of the season, where Matt's already screwed things up because he slept with Elektra or something, blah, 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 and destroyed their relationship. And she now knows, and she has a vendetta against Matt now. I'm just really interested now. This is the thing. Also, she's back alluding to a really bad previous life over the last course of episodes, including this one again. And I'm like, they're going to have to start delving into that further. Otherwise, it's just going to be like nerds like us. And I'm using nerds in a lovely sense of the word because I enjoy that term. I am a nerd about comic books. It's a good thing. But like other people are kind of like, they're glancing kind of off the cuff comments. Whereas for us, it's like, oh, come on. Just
just take drugs, will you, Karen? And like fall apart.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, where is this going? Give me the next
Madam
piece.
Gow.
Madam Gow.
Feed her a cocaine cake or something like that. You know, she needs to come off the rails.
Exactly.
Because that will just drive dramatic craziness from Matt Murdock.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a great allusion to it in this episode during the second part of their date, where Matt's talking to her about why he lives in New York and what he loves about the city and the fact that it keeps opening up itself to you. There's so much more going on, and it is a city full of millions and millions of people. And then she says, well, I came from a town of a very small population, 200 or 300, I think she says. And Matt goes, oh, is that why you came to the city? And she just says, no. So again, another character questioning straight out why Karen's in the city. And again, no answer from Karen, just no. That's not the reason. So, I like that there's still this kind of build up. We'll get more. Definitely get more as the season goes on. Chris, do you want to crack on with your next point?
Yeah. So far, or this episode, it's done a really good job of not over sexualizing Elektra. Like, kind of like didn't put her in just the red body leotard like that most people expected. Even towards the end of the episode, like she was in a kind of dressing gown, and when there was just off slowly as she walked off camera, she slid down, and you just saw her in a vest and underwear. And that's great because they could have gone the very stereotypical kind of, here she is in her underwear, look, oogle her men, but they haven't, and it's great because it doesn't sacrifice the seductive elements of her. But my God, how awkward and cringeworthy was that bloody sex scene in Fogwell's gym? No, it was a great build-up in terms of the kind of reveal of his kind of senses and stuff.
Yeah, that was cool.
But that was like something out of like 1990s kind of like Basic Instinct type filmography, kind of like.
Oh, I loved it.
Really? It was so cheesy.
I was just hoping. I just hope they disinfected the ring.
Oh my God. Like, how'd you get hepatitis? Yeah, like there's going to be blood, sweat, tears, everything on that floor. Absolutely. And they're having sex on it.
Yeah, kids, always disinfect the ring after sex.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was just, I don't know, it was kind of, it was like, they even did the kind of cliche about holding the hands as they kind of climaxed, and the two of them squeezing fists together.
Well, they did do one worse, and it's the one thing that stood out for me from that sex scene. One worse than that, not holding hands. It is Matt's hand around her throat at the end of the sex scene.
Yeah.
So that I think is, obviously there's a flashback. It's Matt's memory of the situation. I don't know whether that's just supposed to allude to the fact that he's already seeing there's a bit of a dark side in him, and that's what she's attracted to. I think there's a little bit of a touch of that.
Yeah.
But it definitely stood out to me at the end of that scene.
But it also looked like the hand in terms of the group as well. Like just the way his hand was positioned around her neck, as though it was almost like some kind of neck bracelet that sort of symbolizes, obviously, the hand as well. If I can actually come to my next point, because actually it's the two break-ins, of which Fogwell's is one of them. Like we have kind of talked about them, but I love these two break-ins because you have with Fogwell's this realization that they both have this physicality about them in terms of both fighting, but also a physical attraction to one another. I really liked the visual of the yellow tinted windows and the light behind them, and you just see her dark shadow walking in front again. I know I've alluded to Daredevil Yellow again, but it felt very reminiscent of that graphic novel. I love the sparring that they did, and then obviously the kinky kind of violent sex, and of course tied up in ropes potentially links to the title of this episode of Daredevil in terms of Kinbaku, which is the Japanese style of bondage or BDSM. So like that was kind of interesting, and that would fit with, I suspect, with Elektra, given her penchant for darkness. And I think as well, she alludes then in the second break-in, the Saucisson and Cornichon part where she's eating cheese off his off his Marvel abs. You see, it's like Luke Cage with the angle grinder on his abs. Yeah. This one, it's like his abs are so hard that she can cut cheese off him. But I love the fact then that again it's this kind of sexual build-up to revealing Roscoe, where they're chucking the glasses and, she's onto the floor, she's teasing him, and then you just have the brutal beatdown. I mean, that was, in a sense, again, reminiscent of the title as well, in terms of, you had the hand around the throat, and then you had this bound and tied figure of Roscoe being beaten. And I mean, this Kinbaku is being bound tightly, literally. It's this, it is an extension of techniques used to restrain prisoners. And, it is also then in sort of looking up this stuff, obviously, I hasten to add,
Google image search.
That, as well, not only is the literal sense to bind tightly, but it is also, in another sense, within bondage, the exchange between two people, describing the person who's doing the tying up and the person who's being tied up and bound.
Right.
So this was all within these two break-ins, and I kind of really liked that, actually. I thought it was it linked to the title. It showed this darkness of both of them. But then you have, as Chris said earlier, Matt walks away from it. Yeah. He recognizes that darkness within him, and that's why he's always guilty. So it's just a really nice kind of extension of all that, I thought.
Absolutely.
I really agree with you. Like the second break-in in that foreplay part was brilliant, and the foreplay in Fogwell's was brilliant. It was just that one sex scene for me was giggle-inducing. It was just. Right. Like, I was like, oh, no. Like, we got something so much better. Because this is a Marvel Netflix project, like, this is the max version of our MCU. I was expecting the Jessica Jones type style of romantic encounters. Like, the angle grinder to the abs, the breaking of bed. We've seen it. Like, they can do it. But this was just for whatever reason. Like, either this is going to end up being that this obviously is his flashback, so it's how he viewed it in his eyes, and then we get a flashback through her eyes and something completely different. Like, that could be an interesting play on it.
But I think in a boxing arena, there's no bed sheets to pull up to hide the, I mean, like, I can understand why they would make the choice to pan down and just show her back and her arms outstretched, and then go to her front and show the hand coming up around the throat, because with the Jessica Jones scene, it was, well, there's the bed sheets. So it's not a full-on naked sex scene. So they're doing it slightly differently because of the environment in which it is. And I mean, if the two of them were able to break a boxing ring, then that is pretty violent.
That's pretty strong.
Okay, so let me withhold judgment until sex scene part 2, and then I'll come back to it.
That'll be over the dead corpses of the Yakuza.
Oh.
Well, judging by
the way things are elevating,
preference.
yeah. So, Derek, what's your next point?
I think this is one of the episodes that had the most Marvel Universe connections in it, and I'm going to rob them all.
Oh no, damn you!
Well, firstly, because we get our first huge reference to Roxxon. Roxxon is something we've talked about in pretty much every single show that we've covered, every movie that we've covered. Roxxon have had a connection in there. We didn't see much of Roxxon in season 1. I think there was just the reference to the van in the first episode and a small reference to them otherwise. But in this episode, we see that this is who Elektra Natchios is going to be working with or for, is Roxxon. She's going to go in and infiltrate them, which is really cool to have this organization still in existence all the way back from, as we saw all the way through our Agent Carter coverage, all the way through the 40s.
Yeah, so. And there we have another strong woman breaking and entering into Roxxon.
Absolutely, yeah. We also have a couple of little Jessica Jones references, which were great in here. We have the return of Marcy, which is Foggy's girlfriend, I suppose, who hasn't called her for months, but she references the fact that she's now working at HC&B, which is Hogarth, Chow and Benowitz, Jerry Hogarth's lawyer agency. And she also references the fact that the mayor's office are cracking down on vigilantes and have taken down one of the vigilantes who worked with HC&B, and that is one Jessica Jones. So one of the cool parts about this is we've now got a timeline for Daredevil season 2, and it takes place right at the end of Jessica Jones season 1, because at the time she is being interviewed by the DA in the final episode of Jessica Jones. She's being interviewed by the DA about her activities, about her being a vigilante in the city. So what this is setting up is the fact that from now onwards, I think we're going to be just after the end of season 1 of Jessica Jones, but from here before the first 5 episodes take place simultaneously with JJ, which I think is quite cool to have that established timeline now. Those are the little ones that I saw within the episode. Any others that I missed?
Yeah, there was a few, and I agree. This was MCU laden. It was fantastic. Just on Roxxon, you're right. Roxxon, we've been told everything. They've been Jessica Jones. They've been in like every one of the actual films, like the Avengers, the Age of Ultron. I'm assuming they're going to be in Civil War somehow. Mm-hmm. But the fact that Asano Robotics is the Japanese arm of Roxxon is something completely new. Now, I think this is an MCU spin, because I'm not wasn't aware of this, but this is actually the second time Asano Robotics is mentioned. Do you remember the crate that had the weird child in it? In the first one, he was
Black Sky.
Yeah, Black Sky. So that was the Asano Robotics kind of logo on the side of it. So this is the second time we've got it.
Mm-hmm. The big unsolved or unexplored mystery from season 1 of Daredevil, actually, yeah.
So what I find is interesting now is that, so if Asano Robotics is the Japanese arm of Roxxon, right? And Roxxon, so Elektra and Matt kind of did their bit in Roxxon, and now at the end of this episode, we're assuming a large group of ninjas are about to storm in, and these ninjas are most likely the Hand. Does that mean that the front for the Hand is Asano Robotics and Roxxon? So that actually Roxxon isn't anyway connected to Hydra that we're aware of. It's actually the Hand.
It's very possible.
So I thought
very possible.
Really,
yeah.
I like that one.
It's all connected to Roxxon. Yes.
Yeah, it's all Roxxon. Do you remember how I mentioned Elektra's first appearance in Daredevil issue 168 by Frank Miller? That was also the same appearance of Grotto.
Right, very
Rest
cool.
in peace.
Okay.
Yeah, rest in peace. No team up with Groton.
I found that was funny because I never connected it, and yeah, I wasn't going to take the JJ reference because that was way too easy. She actually said the name. Come on, man. Put a bit of work into it.
I got HC and B.
True, you did. Okay, I'll give you that. The final one I got is when Karen's in the Bulletin's office. Did you see the framed headlines across the wall?
Yes. Yeah.
So we got Battle of New York. So obviously the Avengers.
Yeah.
And there was the Stark Tower one. But then did you see Cybertech Settles?
No.
Yes. Do you remember Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Cybertech? With Deathlock?
Yes.
There you go. So that's just like another reference to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think we're getting closer to old Coulson coming in.
I think we might be.
Yeah, because they're just, they're like throwing them in now. So
that would be cool.
What I'm expecting is towards the end of this season, we'll get some type of mention of fish, oil type destruction, kind of like pollution, kind of infections, which will allude to the Inhumans arc that's going on at the moment in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So then that will tie everything towards the end of this season as just before Civil War.
Yeah, it would be very cool to at least tie in the timelines of the shows as well, because we're unsure of the timelines of these and the movies.
I'm not entirely sure that is going to happen. It would be cool if it did. I'm not entirely sure. I think they might allude to those things in little Easter eggs like that, or like they did in season 1, where they talk about the property being built up again and Kingpin being involved in that based on the Avengers. I reckon they'll do things like that, but I think this is generating its own.
Oh, absolutely.
No, but I mean more so like, we were talking about this with Agent Carter as well, where, you've got the black goo. It looked very similar to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and it never played out. And I don't know whether, because it's a Marvel Netflix driven show, it's not that they're not going to reference it. I get that, but I still don't think that it's going to be that explicit. Yeah, it's going to bring in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I would actually love it too, but it's in the same way that I would have loved the black space goo from Agent Carter to have been something linking to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Grant Ward, and that never actually happened. And so I wonder, but it would be cool if it did, definitely.
It certainly never happened in Age of Carter, but I still hold out hope that we'll see a connection brought into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., definitely. And I think to the point about that Chris made about the fish goo connecting to the Inhumans, I think if that's also a headline that's in the New York Bulletin office, I think that's probably enough as well for me, just to kind of set the timeline. It's about all I want. I don't know whether we're ever going to get Coulson actually crossing over, although Clark Gregg has definitely said that he needs to meet Iron Fist at some point. So potentially down the line in the future of the Defenders, we will have a Coulson appearance, and I think it will probably be an Iron Fist, just because Clark Gregg centers this universe for the TV shows and he wants to be on that show. So
I just think from my side, it's that they need, remember the way we had Nick Fury in the lead up to the Avengers? He was always kind of in the post-credit scene. It was that one person connecting it all. Yeah. We kind of need that now. Like, I think we need that for the person who's not like us, kind of looking for the Easter eggs and connecting the headlines and stuff. We need a very blunt, in your face, this is the same universe. Like, okay, referencing the Kingpin and like the Battle of New York and all that is great. But my partner was sitting on the couch and did not recognize it because I squealed. Like, I was like, ooh, look at that. Like, she didn't notice a thing. Yeah. But so they need something more that's kind of like a Nick Fury type intro.
But there's Jessica Jones. I mean, they mentioned that in this episode. Like, in terms of these Marvel Netflix shows, they are all interconnected. And they're connecting them through things like the newspaper articles or the mention of maybe wider MCU. As I say, I would love to see that. And maybe Black Sky will be connected with Inhumans in some way, or whether it's something completely different linked into Iron Fist. But I would think it would be more likely that they would be actually connecting it to Luke Cage or something different, rather than outside of their own street level heroes. I mean, even like in Jessica Jones, we have Night Nurse talking about, well, this isn't the first person that I've come across. Okay. So there's subtle ones, there's more blatant ones.
Absolutely. And speaking of blunt, you've got your blunt New Yorker who is Night Nurse. Effectively, she is your blunt New Yorker that's connecting all these characters together. We know for a fact she's in Luke Cage and has a bigger role than she had in Jessica Jones. Very likely if she's in Luke Cage, she's going to be in Iron Fist and she's going to be around for Defenders. So is the big connection effectively that she gets kidnapped at the start of Defenders and all these people that she's helped out throughout their series come together to take down whoever it is that kidnapped her? Is it just as simple as that? Is that what you need for a street level group to get together? But I don't think we're ever going to get a huge crossover episode like we thought we would in season 1 of Daredevil when this whole wonderful set of shows started. I don't think we're ever going to get our big crossover between Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that universe because it's not the same universe.
Quick question. Black Sky is not an Inhuman, is he?
We don't know.
But we don't know. He could be.
He was a child. He's now dead at the hands of Stick in season 1. That's all we know about Black Sky from season 1.
Because remember, with Stick as well, we did have that fairly mystical element with the guy with the incense or the joss sticks burning. Stone, yeah. So there's still all that, and I wonder whether it will go. Obviously we're going to get the Hand here, so.
And when the two of them get together, they're going to break some bones, definitely. So looking forward to that.
I think, look, so we can kind of wrap this point kind of, I just think, I agree, for the Netflix universe, they're connecting that perfectly. That's the way, if we want to call it a microverse or a sub-universe, right? Just of the Netflix shows.
Couple of streets, really.
Okay, yeah. The Hell's Kitchen universe. They're connecting that perfectly because they have the characters and the mentions, and so people will get that. What I think it just needs is, and this probably might not even happen to the end of Defenders, is just, you need a walk-on from the likes of some big character who people would understand, from Benedict Cumberbatch, from the kind of Nick Fury, kind of Samuel Jackson, or even the Coulson. Just someone very brief, just to kind of, for the person who's not who delves as deep into this as well, it's just, it kind of goes, oh, so this is actually happening. It's the same thing when I go watch Civil War in a couple of weeks. Just that kind of bit more anchor tight. And I think that's all I think they need. Just one or two small anchors that just then kind of ties it in, makes everyone go, okay, everything's connected.
Yeah. Wasn't that the reason why Benedict Cumberbatch was in New York? We start that rumor right now.
Yes, let's say that. There we go.
that he just had that one line that he says to Matt Murdock, "You can use my place anytime," and opens up the doors of the Sanctum Sanctorum to Matt Murdock.
There you go.
Exactly.
And that's it.
I heard that from a reliable source.
Yes. John, do you want to give us your next point?
I do. I really liked the expansion of the DA Reyes, her motives from this, and how it obviously links in with Karen pursuing the Punisher narrative, and actually the lack of a narrative that's been put out by not only the DA's office but also the press. That, there's nothing mentioned about his army past or his family being wiped out, or even that he had a family. Yeah. Or even, the holes in the story, including, the lack of any acknowledgement of the hole in the head. I really like that, and I love the fact that linking to Jessica Jones with the DA's office is looking to build a platform for Reyes to become the mayor of New York on the basis of taking down the Punisher and building a conviction against him. And that they've even got, obviously, with what happened in Jessica Jones, the fact that she was there questioning Jessica Jones with Hogarth there towards the end of the first season, that they've got her eye on that, and this is all leading to Reyes' sort of pitch to become the mayor of New York, and how that may potentially link in with the suits that were mentioned previously surrounding the Punisher. There feels as though there's some complicity there between the DA's office and whatever happened to the Punisher. Yeah. And that those doors are going to get blown sort of wide open, and maybe we see then the development of sort of Foggy or Blake going towards the DA post. I think, as I've mentioned previously. So I don't know. I wonder if that's one of the cases. But I did really like this expansion of her motives as the DA. There's a little, subplot going on there, which I'm kind of intrigued to find out about, whether it might interlink a bit more with the Punisher's backstory as well. Yeah. So I kind of like that sort of nod here in this episode.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely really enjoyed that building out of Reyes' character now that we've seen her now in 2 series, even though it was only 1 scene in Jessica Jones. But yeah, just to that point, part of my next point really was just about Blake Tower versus Foggy Nelson. You'd mentioned last week in your points about the fact that they are referenced in the comic books. They're both quite big characters in the comic books, and that Foggy had tried to become the DA at a point, and Blake Tower was his rival in that fight for the DA's office. So really good to have these 2 characters have a scene together where you've got Foggy telling him that he'd be hugely cooperative if he followed the law, because that's what Foggy does. I love that. Love the scene. Love that Foggy shoots him down. I love how
show me a subpoena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll do it for you. Just show me a subpoena. Yeah.
I thought it would agree. I think Reyes is kind of, they're building Reyes as a kind of anti-vigilante type kind of person from just what we're learning.
Or pro-registration, as it might be called soon.
Oh my God. Yeah. See, yeah, everything's connected.
Yeah, that would be very cool, actually, yeah. Because I was just about to say that she's that General Ross type character, but from this world, and that would kind of link nicely into that registration aspect as well.
I agree. I think, and that's one of the reasons I really like that they've got Reyes in now, and they're building her as the big bad for the law firm, if you want to put it that way. So the lawful big bad, because everything she's doing is above the law. Like, she's just withholding small bits of information. Like, she's playing the game very much. And that's why I like that character. And I'm interested to see where they take this storyline, because I think if you imagine the law firm as a kind of character, this is the Daredevil's arch nemesis. This is the law firm's arch nemesis, because everything that they do, they fight for the little guy, and she's doing this just to better herself.
Yeah.
And what I really want to see is if she takes down the Nelson and Murdock. Like, she rips them apart almost towards the end of the season. What I don't want is that this is a small thread piece, if you know what I mean. Like, connecting the 2 dots to two episodes. I want this to I actually do want this to blossom. Like, if they do a whole courtroom episode, I'm in heaven. Law and Order, Nelson and Murdock v. Reyes. Like, I would watch that shit.
Yeah.
Like, could be good.
Absolutely. And it's one of the huge elements, obviously, about the comic books, is that he's a lawyer by day and defender of Hell's Kitchen by night. So we haven't seen a huge amount of the lawyering. We saw 1 episode of it last season, or 1 bit of it last season. I'm wondering if that's going to be Foggy's element of this season, that he is going to be taking on the DA, and he's going to be trying to get Reyes now. We've already seen him versus Blake Tower now. So that's kind of maybe be his angle, as Karen follows her angle on the Punisher to investigate and clear him, I suppose, of his crimes by providing his backstory to the police and to the people around. And then you have, obviously Matt working with Elektra, possibly, taking down the more evil, more, violent threats towards the city. And then they all culminate as the rest of the season goes on. Yeah,
that would be good. I'd like that. I'd watch that show.
Absolutely. We will watch the show. We will podcast about it.
Single female lawyer.
Foggy Nelson.
Foggy lawyer.
Oh my God, that'd be an amazing theme tune. Foggy Nelson. I just see him running towards the court, like slow-mo, like Baywatch. I'll be there forever. That's a copyright strike.
Single male lawyer.
There you go.
Poor Foggy is single as well. I mean, I really liked how Foggy is so kind of tough here with Blake as well. I thought that was really cool. But Derek, what's your next point?
my final point is really just a little glimpse at the end of the episode of what we see at the end and how it's going to lead into next time's episode. It's made me 100% want to skip ahead. As most of our listeners know, I make the guys stop at the end of this episode. They're allowed to watch
my pearls.
the episode as many times as they want to before we podcast.
I'm going to faint.
But not allowed to move on. This, for the first time since I think one of the episodes of Jessica Jones, I think probably episode 11 or episode 10 of Jessica Jones, I 100% was letting that countdown clock get as close to 1 before turning it off, to make my notes for the podcast.
I've secretly watched all the episodes. I go down at about 3 a.m.
I know you haven't, because I can see.
Damn you, Netflix, and your data tracking.
But the fact that we have effectively Elektra presenting, Daredevil with his Daredevil costume in her apartment. She's taken it from Matt's apartment without him knowing about it. I was wondering for parts of this episode why he wasn't dressed in his costume to monitor Elektra when she was in the offices of Roxxon, that kind of stuff. It seemed a bit odd that he hadn't done any activity in the costume. But what we find out is actually, even if he'd gone looking for it, Elektra had already stolen it and brought it to her apartment, waiting for Matt, you know. So she knows all about Matt's real side. She knows all about how to get him on her side. She knows all of his secrets. So not only was she did she have a relationship with him years ago that broke up after the incident with Roscoe, she also knows everything about him now and is very quick to bring it to him that she knows all about him. So thought it was a great ending to the episode. I wish we could have moved on, especially because we've seen part of the fight scene in one of the trailers in the past. So I know the fight scene is going to be pretty cool to watch when we get to it next time.
That's actually one of my final points too. But I'm taking it from a different tack.
Okay.
That was an annoying hell of a cliffhanger. Like, they showed it to us in the trailer.
Absolutely.
Like, just that fade to black, I was like, no! This is the Netflix formula.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the cliffhanger in the hell that you just like, that countdown clock, so that you just go, oh, I really just want to see what happens when that guy with the silencer runs in.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, come on. That was not fair.
It's so fair for normal Netflix users. It's so unfair for us. It's not fair for anybody who podcasts with me, definitely. But that's my final point. Chris, do you have a final point?
Actually was my final point, as I kind of said, like, that annoyed the hell out of me, that kind of ending.
But I'm gonna take total blame for that. I'm not gonna put that on Netflix.
Well, okay, fine. I'm gonna blame you. But like, it just, that kind of, I wanted a bit more payoff up front. Because this episode focused more on the storytelling and the kind of backstory, we did not get that much kind of action, I don't want to even call it action. It was just a lot of there was a lot of monologue. There was a lot, aside from the kind of the second mansion scene with battling Jack's kind of gunman or murderer. Like, I kind of expected a bit more. I understand why they did it, but I just wanted that bit more climactic. Even if they cut mid-fight scene, where like they kind of like Elektra jumps out and throws the bag at Matt, and then while he's putting on his gear, she's battling two of them.
Right.
And then he finally pulls on the helmet, and then it's, okay, now it's go time. That's a better ending. It's just like, they could have given it a bit more, I don't know, a bit more oomph. I understand why they do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought it was cool that, we know the Yakuza are coming up the side of the apartment block, or the skyscraper. One of the things I was unsure about really was why Matt had gone to her penthouse after going out with Karen. That didn't seem to have been fully explained. I mean, he's there asking about the Roscoe incident, so okay, in terms of the flashback it makes sense, but that's not actually happening in the present. And so, okay, maybe it's his memories, we've been saying it's what he's remembering about it, so maybe that's ultimately why. But I was wondering whether, it was just the fact that, he's building this relationship with Karen, but then an old flame that he doesn't necessarily want to speak to again, is back, but then he goes up to her apartment.
That's mad.
Yeah, well, no, exactly. And I think that, there is that sultriness about Elektra that despite what she's done in the past, despite what her kind of her persuasion is with regards to this sort of nod to violence. In a sense, what does she call? She goes, there's always been this glorious darkness in you.
Mm-hmm.
So they both do have that kindred spirit still, even though Matt does want to step back from that. And maybe Karen is that other side of him. And I suppose that's just really segue into my final point, which was I actually really loved Matt and Karen's date.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the move from the expensive restaurant to kind of the local Asian restaurant. I thought the lights on the ceiling was like fantastic. I was like, if I opened a restaurant, I would love to have all those coloured lights. And I just thought, like, there was such an awkwardness in the expensive restaurant, and then there was this relaxed conversation, and it was all about my city. It was, they're talking about the diversity and how great New York City is. It's just, I think, really, really nice.
Yeah,
it frames the kiss really well, and I suppose it contrasts then with his relationship or what follows next up in Elektra's penthouse. So I kind of really like that. I also kind of like the transition from, this expensive restaurant with the awkwardness, and they say I've never been that comfortable with rich stuff, to this sort of street style restaurant, and then you have the transition from going from the side streets where this restaurant is, the relative quietness in the midst of Manhattan and Hell's Kitchen, to suddenly coming out into the hustle and bustle of the city, and you suddenly get all these sirens, people sort of talking loudly, shouting, and there's this moment where he comes out the side street into this more kind of noisy atmosphere. And I thought that was I just thought it was really cool. It was a really nice kind of visual in this episode. And again, it tees up nicely Karen and Matt's relationship, really. Yeah. Which was great. I've actually just remembered as well, Elektra does call him whilst he's in the restaurant.
Yes, she does.
So she's on his mind, so that's probably why he goes back there.
Yeah. That's exactly why, yeah.
Hooray! I figured it out.
You've solved it.
I've solved the massive mystery.
Yeah, no, the date sequence is really, really good. I really like the fact that they're actually trying to take the opportunity to go on a date. And if you've ever gone on a date with a coworker, what do you talk about for the first 10 minutes of it? It's all about work. How was your day? Well, because you were in the office with me all day, kind of thing. I thought that was quite fun. I love the touch with Matt using his great charm of being a blind guy and using it to his advantage, to Karen kind of going, where she says, I wish you could see the place. And he says, I can if you describe it to me.
That's really cool. That was a nice line.
It's a great line. Yeah. And then as she describes it to him, she goes, this is sounding really cheesy, but I promise it isn't. Love that little moment where she's talking about all the lights overhead, and some of them being peppers that are shaped like light bulbs, and he's kind of looking at her.
Yeah. I love how it just contrasts the fact that he is, he has the little kiss with her on the steps, and then he doesn't want to go upstairs and spoil that moment. Yeah. That he leaves it. And that's kind of in total contrast to obviously what we see at Fogwell's, with this sort of hot, passionate sort of monster that's going on in the middle of the boxing ring.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love it. Yeah, the lines that he says to her are really well written again. In this scene, he says, I have an incredible ability to bring disaster to the things I love most. If I leave it here, then I have tomorrow to look forward to, and then maybe the next day. And then Karen finishes it with, and the next day as well. So, a nice little bit of the planning for the future, again, showing the huge difference between Matt as a 20-year-old and Matt as, a mid-30s guy. Very, very different attitude, of those stages in life, and obviously pursuing a bigger relationship here with Karen than he was with Elektra, which was a little boxing ring fling, I suppose. That's it for points on the episode. I've just got one quick note because it's one of the other references I forgot. The fact that in the New York Bulletin, the editor tells them that the reason why they don't have a filing system is because during the incident, all of their computers were wiped. So again, a little reference to the New York incident.
Well done on that one. I missed that.
There you go. Any other notes? Anybody else?
No, I don't think so.
So with that, Chris, do you defend this episode of Daredevil, episode 5, Kinbaku?
Yes, this episode was a real change of pace, especially after the Punisher mini arc.
Mm-hmm.
But it focused on a new character. And so, it's understandable they changed the tone slightly. And as I said, they replaced the rage and adrenaline with this kind of icy kind of manipulation style. Everything was cold and it was a lot better. And it's the official introduction of Elektra.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. This is the second big get we've got after Punisher. And like the Punisher, they got it right of what we've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They perfectly encapsulated this Miller-esque type, John Romita Jr. type Elektra from the comic books, from the kind of back in the day. But it was good. My fear was this kind of really bad take from the comic, a direct translation from the comics, which probably wouldn't have worked. But they've managed just to take, using a fantastic actress, they've managed from just this episode to introduce a character who is huge in this lore and in a way that doesn't make you go, oh, is that how they did that?
Yeah, it'd be just like the Elektra movie then.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh. My only downside for this whole episode would really be the cringeworthy, in my opinion, sex scene in the gym. Although there was some other points there that was that were interesting, from your side. The hand. For me, it was just a bit too cringeworthy, and I've seen Marvel and Netflix do so much better with sex scenes and the building the tension, which they did better 2 scenes later. But no, that was the only downside. So yes, I defend this episode.
By sex scenes, you mean just Jessica and Luke Cage? Because literally there have been no others.
No, yeah, exactly. But they did it so much better. So, John, do you defend this episode?
I do defend this episode of Daredevil. I will give this 4.5 cheesy abs out of 5. You know, I really like the change of pace in this episode. I think it was initially I didn't quite know where it was going because of, you know, it's off the back of such a bloodthirsty, violent rawness of this initial arc of Punisher, and some of his backstory, and obviously reintroducing, you know, I mean, there was a fight in episode, between Daredevil and Punisher for the first 3, and then obviously the big showdown with, Finn, in those catacombs. So, this was a really nice change of pace, and I love the fact that it was centered around Matt Murdock and essentially his relationships, with women, with Elektra, and that initial kindred spirit sort of turning into a fairly dramatic exposure of the level of the darkness within her, and Matt trying to sort of pull back from that. Then with the purer form that is Karen Page, and how he's approaching that relationship because of obviously everything we see in this episode with Elektra. I think a bit like with you guys, you know, the fact that we knew what was about to happen with the Yakuza coming up in the elevator and probably up the side of the building, that, you know, it would have been nice just to have seen that in this episode. I mean, I know, you know, it's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 down to the next episode if you really want to do that. So, I mean, technically you could argue there isn't really a break. It's just how we're watching it. But, you know, it would have just been quite nice, maybe even just to see them burst through or see them doing that abseil up the building to get there. That would have been quite cool. I loved in this episode, I loved the 2 break-ins at Fogwell's gym, at Roscoe's, and I kind of just loved that contrast between Elektra and Matt with regards to the whiskey and the champagne. I just thought that was really nice, and I thought it was nice how it seemed to link in, or at least I interpreted that to the title of this episode in quite a nice, sort of smart way, really. And then after that, you know, there were other little aspects that were flowing through this, such as the DA's motives, you know, Foggy maintaining his real sort of his savviness in the law arena. I love the idea that's come out from the podcast as well, that maybe, Reyes does become pro-registration, and that may lead into this season of Daredevil, or even beyond in one of the other Marvel Netflix shows. I think that'd be really cool, and a nice little consequence of Civil War. So all in all, absolutely defend this episode of Daredevil. And I mean, again, just seeing Karen doing her pursuit of Frank Castle's story was kind of interesting to see. And I wonder, will she become destructive at some point in this season? She wasn't in season 1, and we thought she might do. Will she become destructive? Will it be Elektra that pushes her over that edge? Because now there are 2 women in Matt's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would actually be really interesting. I wonder how that's going to play out.
Absolutely. But Derek, do you defend this episode of Daredevil?
I certainly defend this episode of Daredevil. Yeah, absolutely loved this one. This intro of Elektra, the flashbacks to young Matt and young Foggy. And Elektra and Matt getting together, really enjoyed them. But you guys have talked about it. We've talked about it for our 5 points. Nothing really more I can say about this episode. Really enjoyed it, and can't wait to see how Elodie Yung plays out in the rest of this series. One of the really exciting things that we've talked about before is that she is a trained black belt in about 3 different martial arts. So a lot of the coming up fight scenes are going to be done by Elodie Yung. So I'm really looking forward to seeing her getting in with full fists and feet flying as we go into the rest of the season. Yeah, really enjoyable. With that, it's time to get on to some feedback. So our first piece of feedback comes from our friend Claire Laffer, who says, I love that Flashback Matt also wears rectangle sunglasses. And David Wang points out that's the same as in last year's Nelson v. Murdoch.
Hey.
Ronaldo also got in contact with us. He says, possibly the hammiest acting so far in the series goes to the waiter in the first scene, Matt and Foggy. Well, he is working in the kitchen, so I guess you need some hammy acting in there. And that's your joke of the week.
Oh my God.
Ronaldo also says, Karen's choice of restaurant on her date with Matt is a highlight of cinematography. Beautiful, vibrant colours give it such a romantic feel.
Oh, absolutely.
Apparently, that is a real restaurant in New York that actually recently got closed down about a year or 2 ago. And now, unless they moved it from its original location, but I was reading somewhere that this was a beloved kind of date spot for many, many people.
Really?
And the comments I was reading is everyone thought it had closed down. So I think they may have actually rebuilt a restaurant, or the decor of this well-known kind of Manhattan Hell's Kitchen style date spot.
Interesting.
Because apparently... So I was like, ooh.
Not enough people fall in love in New York, obviously.
That must be it.
That's a quick 20 levels in an elevator and back down again.
All right. We will have to look out for the next time we're in New York and see if we can find it. Ronaldo goes on with his thoughts, saying, initially it was a bit of a hard episode to settle into after the adrenaline of the Punisher arc, but the episode builds an interesting emotional side to Matt, Elektra and Karen in between all the investigating, and Elektra's unexpected arrival in Hell's Kitchen. Reintroducing Sweeney was a clever way to show both Elektra's skewed way of showing her affection for Matt and Matt's revenge, but ultimate disdain of Elektra's nature.
Ooh.
Yeah, really good points, Ronaldo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm like, damn, can we just record this episode? I'll take some of them. I'm just asking.
Your points were good. Don't worry. Thanks for that feedback, Ronaldo.
Absolutely.
Ronaldo, Claire and David did leave their feedback over on our Facebook group. You can go and join that just by going to facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast. We also have a bit of feedback that came in through our email address, which is feedback@Defenders TV podcast. You could share any of your thoughts in over there. This feedback came in from Lieutenant Floby. Really sorry about this. I meant to get this in last week's episode just to get the chance before the edit, but Lieutenant Floby says, Hi guys, love your podcasts. I have 2 comments for you. One, regarding Daredevil following the trail of the dog's blood, my take on that was slightly different. It seemed like he lost the scent of the dog's blood when the shopkeeper hosed down the sidewalk. However, he heard the police radio coming from a nearby building and used the sound to continue his tracking of the Punisher. Really good point. I have since watched back the episode. Totally right. That's exactly what happens. Daredevil does lose the trail of the dog's blood, and then picks up the sound coming from all the radios that are within Frank Castle's little hideout. So I was wondering how he made that leap, how he was able to still continue on and follow the dog's blood, but he wasn't. He was following something else. Smart Daredevil there.
Absolutely.
And the second point from Floby is, as a longtime fan of the comic book, I'm so happy with the portrayal of Foggy. Foggy easily could have been the chubby, bumbling sidekick, but between the casting and writing, they have nailed the character. Foggy's the heart of Nelson and Murdock and loyal to a fault. I'm just thrilled that they really understand Foggy. Keep up the great show, guys. Thanks, Floby.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually think he's being written so much better this season. That compared to the first season, he was still written well in the first season, but I don't know, it almost felt he was slightly peripheral, in the first season when you compare the level of, storyline that he's getting and how integral it was, at least for the first 4 episodes. I thought it was really good. Okay, I know, characters move back and forth between episodes, but I've really enjoyed Foggy, much more, so far this season, compared to first season. Not that I didn't like him in the first season. I just thought, it ultimately did become about Kingpin and Daredevil.
Certainly.
I mean, it was a different story to tell. But yeah, I think Foggy's arc, and the same with Karen in this season so far, from what I've seen, for me, it is really a lot better.
Yeah, no, and I'm in agreement as well. I think they've learned from last year, from the first season. Like, they listen to our podcast. Thank you, writers. We thank you for your patronage. And they've taken some of those points where the characters, they were there, they were like 80% complete. Mm-hmm. And just because of the way that the pacing had to finish up, and they had to focus more and more on Matt and Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, they had to kind of put these characters a bit more sidelined. And now they kind of go, well, actually now, remember, like they weren't supposed to get a second season. Mm-hmm. So now they've gone, okay, well, what stories can we tell? Wow, well, we've got these 2 characters that we haven't really they hadn't fully fleshed out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of Foggy's character in the last season was just circling around Matt a lot. It was like, that's his best friend. He's the one that set up the law firm with him. He finds out about Matt being Daredevil. This season has had a lot more activity from Foggy Nelson in the law firm, being a lawyer, standing up to people around him, showing that he is a very strong character. And yeah, totally agree. Really enjoyed those elements of the character that have been brought out. And the fact that he's no longer at arm's length with Matt. So he knows all about Matt's sideline, his other gig, I suppose. So, they're able to have a lot more interaction about that side of his life than they were able to in the first season as well. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot more Foggy, and totally agree with Floby here. He is a great character, and they've done a great job at creating him. Definitely.
Yeah,
completely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Floby, to Claire, David, and Ronaldo for all the feedback and comments. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
And guys, completely agree. Thank you so much for your feedback. We want to hear it. You have a point, you have an opinion, we will read it out every time we podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you differ and you spot any Easter eggs that we miss, because it kills me every time. But at least I know then that other people are catching the ones I miss.
Absolutely.
We've still got an Easter egg to get through, actually.
I'm not allowed Easter eggs this year.
I got a Kinder Easter egg which had Thor in it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
The Kinder egg was, of course, gorgeous, but you don't need quite as many different parts to put Thor together as you probably would have done in the 80s.
No, probably not.
Was it a giant Easter egg?
Yeah.
So it's a giant
big Thor
Kinder egg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Where was that all my life?
I know. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
But on that note, I think it's time to end out the episode. It's been great having everybody back around the microphones for one episode, and hopefully we'll have it all again next episode 6 of Daredevil Season 2.
Yeah, and of course, remember, you can find us at defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes. Please subscribe to us there and review the show. Helps other people on iTunes find the show. And of course, if you're not an iTunes person, then of course you can find us in any good or evil podcasts, Player FM, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, or Beyond Pod. And again, subscribe to us there, and our lovely tones will pop into your earlugs every time we upload and publish one of our podcasts.
And remember, we love you, and we always want to hear your feedback, and you are cool, but you will never be as cool as Benedict Cumberbatch in New York, dressed as Doctor Strange, buying Doctor Strange comics cool. You may be cool, but we still want to hear from you, because if you are Benedict Cumberbatch dressed as Doctor Strange emailing us, John may just die.
No, I would faint, absolutely. With pleasure. And remember, we love you, but we don't Kinbaku love you.
Hey.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
This has been a Flickering Myth Podcast Network production. For more information, head over to flickeringmyth.com for more shows like it. Find this show in iTunes by searching for the podcast name, and head over to youtube.com/flickeringmyth to subscribe to the Flickering Myth movie show. We'll see you on the next podcast. Take care. Bye bye.